He left Mecca as a migrant with much of his old position behind him, and in Medina he rebuilt his life through trade. The man in this story is Abdur Rahman ibn Auf, one of the most celebrated merchant figures in early Islamic history. His life joins early conversion, migration, business skill, military service, political trust, and famous generosity in one powerful story. That is why Muslim memory honors him not only for wealth, but also for faith, service, and charity. The title begins with loss in Mecca and ends with abundance in Medina, and that before and after is the heart of his story. Before Medina, he belonged to Quraysh in Mecca and moved inside a known world of kinship, trade, and social standing. After the Hijrah to Medina, he entered a new city without the same commercial base and without the same support system. Yet later Islamic memory remembers him as one of the wealthiest and most successful companions of the Prophet. His story starts in Mecca in the late 6th century, and his birth is commonly dated to around the year 580. He belonged to the Quraysh tribe, and more specifically to Banu Zura, a clan connection often noted with the Prophet's maternal side. Traditional reports say his pre-Islamic name was changed after he accepted Islam, marking a new stage in his life. He was among the earliest converts to Islam, and reports say Abu Bakr played a role in bringing him to the faith. That detail matters because it places him very close to the beginning of the Muslim community in Mecca. He was not a late supporter who arrived after the path was easy, but one of the first believers. Sunni tradition also counts him among the 10 companions who were promised paradise, and that gave his memory lasting honor. His early Islam was not socially comfortable because the first Muslims in Mecca faced ridicule, pressure, and at times persecution. Those early years trained him in patience long before he became known for wealth, trade, and large acts of charity. Traditional biographical sources also place him among those who migrated to Abyssinia in the early years of Islam. That means migration was already part of his life before the famous move from Mecca to Medina. So when people tell his story as a rise from almost nothing in Medina, they are telling only one part. Behind that Medinan success stood years of faith, pressure, and movement from one place to another. Then came the Hijrah, the migration to Medina that changed the future of the Muslim community and changed his own future. This is the turning point that makes the story feel so powerful, because it gives us a clear before and after. He left Mecca and much of his earlier world, then reached Medina without the same resources he once knew. In Medina, the Prophet established bonds of brotherhood between the migrants from Mecca and the helpers from Medina. This pairing was practical, social, and deeply emotional because the migrants had left home, property, and familiar support behind. Traditional accounts say Abdur Rahman ibn Auf was paired with Sayyid ibn al-Rabi, a generous man from the Ansar. Sayyid ibn al-Rabi offered something remarkable, and this is one of the most famous moments in Abdur Rahman's life story. He offered to share his wealth, and traditional reports even say he was willing to part from one of his wives. The plan was that after her waiting period, Abdur Rahman ibn Auf could marry, showing how far Sayyid was willing to help. This was not a small polite offer. It was a serious act of generosity from one brother in faith to another. Then came the answer that later generations never forgot, because it revealed the kind of man Abdur Rahman ibn Auf was. He thanked Sayyid ibn al-Rabi for the offer, and then asked only to be shown the marketplace. That short answer became famous because it showed dignity, independence, and confidence after displacement from Mecca. He did not reject kindness, and he did not mock generosity, but he chose to rebuild through work. Later Muslim memory loved that reply because it turned him into a model of self-reliance within brotherhood. He accepted the bond of faith, yet he did not want to live only on another man's household support. The marketplace became his next classroom, his next test, and the place where the Medina transformation truly began. Classical narratives say he started trading in ordinary goods like clarified butter and cheese in the Medina market. These were not glamorous luxury goods in the story, but everyday items that people needed and bought regularly. That detail matters because it shows he did not wait for a perfect opportunity or a grand inheritance. He started where he could start, using small trade, practical goods, and commercial skill to build capital again. Reports differ on the exact sequence of his early deals, and they differ on how fast each step grew. But the major retellings agree on the pattern, and that pattern is clear across the tradition. He entered the market with little, traded honestly, used skill and trust, and accumulated wealth quickly. That makes a story feel earned rather than magical, because the turning point comes through discipline and judgment. The Medinan market rewarded people who could judge demand, protect trust, and keep trade moving from small amounts to larger ones. Abdur Rahman ibn Auf became known as exactly that kind of merchant, and his name rose with his business. A well-known anecdote shows how quickly his recovery in Medina became visible to the Prophet and the community. The Prophet once noticed traces of yellow perfume on Abdur Rahman ibn Auf and asked about it. Abdur Rahman explained that he had married, and the story includes a modest amount of gold as bridal gift. That report matters because marriage in Medina shows he was already stable enough to support family life. The famous line about the marketplace was therefore not only a beautiful sentence, it led to real results. His trade became strong enough that he could marry, maintain a household, and continue growing as a merchant. This is one reason his story speaks so strongly to people who face displacement, migration, or a difficult restart. It says a man can lose his old setting, move cities, and still rebuild with faith and effort. His new prosperity in Medina did not pull him away from the Prophet or from public duty. Reports connect him with participation in Badr, and that places him inside the earliest and most important struggles of Islam. He is also associated with other campaigns, showing that he was not only a man of shops and caravans. That matters because early Islamic memory did not preserve him as a rich man standing safely away from hardship. It preserved him as a believer who traded, fought, served, and remained near the center of the community. He was also part of the consultative core around the Prophet, which shows that trust in him went beyond money. One notable episode appears during the Tabuk expedition, and later scholars often cite it to show his standing. Reports say the congregational prayer had begun before the Prophet arrived, and Abdur Rahman ibn Auf was leading it. Then the Prophet prayed behind Abdur Rahman ibn Auf, a detail remembered as a sign of great respect. That report is not about wealth at all. It is about rank, trust, and honor in the community. As his fortune rose, another part of his memory rose with it, and that part is generosity. Here caution is important, because later literature preserves many large number reports, and not all are equally strong. Still, the big picture is consistent across the tradition, even when exact numbers vary from report to report. Abdur Rahman ibn Auf repeatedly spent from his wealth in support of the Muslim community. Traditional reports credit him with large donations, support for warriors, freeing slaves, and care for widows and the poor. That means wealth in his case was not remembered as private comfort alone, but as a source of public benefit. Some reports say he gave hundreds of camels in charity, and some say he gave horses as well. Those reports build the image of a man whose riches moved outward into the life of the community. Another famous story tells of a caravan so large that its arrival shook Medina's economy and social life. The number in that caravan story often appears around 700 camels, though scholars present that carefully as a traditional report. That careful phrasing matters, because exact figures vary, but the memory of great scale remains strong. Even without one fixed number, the story shows how large his commercial operations had become in Medina. A man who once asked only for the marketplace was later remembered through giant caravan imagery. That contrast is part of what gives the story its force, because the beginning was humble and the later scale was enormous. His wealth grew, but tradition does not remember him as a man intoxicated by prosperity. Instead, many reports remember him as spiritually uneasy about luxury and fearful about his own comfort. Several reports describe him weeping at meals, worried that worldly blessings were coming to him too quickly. He feared that abundance in this life might come while other companions had died with much less. Whether every report is equally strong in transmission, the moral picture is very consistent. He earned aggressively in trade, but he did not hold his wealth with careless pride. Later Muslim memory loved this balance because it joined lawful ambition with inner fear of Allah. That balance is one reason Abdur Rahman ibn Auf became a symbol of halal wealth in Islamic thought. His story teaches that commerce itself was not the problem. The problem would be greed without piety or giving. He therefore became a model for a distinct early Islamic ideal about money and morality. That ideal says migration does not end dignity, trade can be honorable, and wealth can serve faith. It also says charity does not require a person to reject ambition, skill, or disciplined business success. This is why his story is stronger than a simple rich man's story or a simple poor man's story. It is a story of displacement, rebuilding, market intelligence, and a conscience that stayed alive inside prosperity. After the Prophet's death, Abdur Rahman ibn Auf did not fade into the background. He remained a senior companion during the caliphates of Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. That continuity shows that his importance reached beyond one moment, one battle, or one caravan. He became one of the trusted elders of the early Muslim community in its most decisive generations. His business success did not block political trust. In fact, his reputation for integrity seems to have strengthened it. One of the clearest proofs came after Umar ibn al-Khattab was fatally stabbed. Umar created an elite six-man council to choose the next caliph, and Abdur Rahman ibn Auf was included in it. That was one of the most serious political tasks in early Islamic history, and Umar did not hand it lightly. Being in that council meant Abdur Rahman ibn Auf stood among the most trusted senior figures in the whole community. His role inside that council became especially important because he helped shape the final selection. Reports describe him playing what many people today would call a kingmaker role. After consultations, he did not push himself into the office of caliph. Instead, he declined the position for himself and became instrumental in the selection of Uthman ibn Affan. That decision adds another layer to his character, because he held influence without needing to seize the highest political office. So when people remember him only as a merchant, they are remembering too little of his life. He was a merchant, yes, but he was also a participant in the deepest political decisions of the early Ummah. His death is commonly dated to the year 6052 during the Caliphate of Uthman. Even the reports about his estate at death continue the same pattern of scale and astonishment. Some traditional narratives say his gold had to be broken up with axes because it had formed solid masses. Other reports focus on the large inheritance shares received by each of his widows. Since transmitted figures vary, careful history avoids pretending we can measure his estate with modern precision. But the broad conclusion is firm, and it appears again and again in the tradition. He died enormously wealthy by the standards of his time, and people remembered that very clearly. Yet Muslim memory did not honor him only because he possessed wealth at death. It honored him because of how he gained wealth, how he gave wealth, and how he feared wealth. That three-part memory is what makes his life so instructive for later generations. He gained through trade, not theft. He gave through charity, not show. He feared the test of prosperity. This is why some devotional retellings call him the richest man in Medina, or even the richest companion. A careful historian speaks a little more cautiously, because other companions, especially Uthman, were also extremely wealthy. So the strongest careful wording is that Abdur Rahman ibn Auf was certainly among the wealthiest of the companions. He was also one of the most commercially successful and publicly generous men in the first Muslim community. That measured wording still leaves the core transformation untouched, and the transformation is what grips the heart. He came as a migrant who had to rebuild, and he became one of Medina's great merchants and benefactors. The city in his story is not only a backdrop. Medina is the place where faith and commerce meet visibly. In Medina, he was paired with a generous brother, shown the market, married, fought, gave, advised, and rose. That is why the Medina stage of his life is stronger than a flat claim about later wealth. Medina gives the story shape. It gives us the empty hand at the start and the full hand later. The empty hand matters because it shows loss, migration, and a break with the old world of Mecca. The full hand matters because it shows recovery, skill, and the blessing of lawful effort under faith. But the fullest hand in his story is not only the hand that earned profit. It is also the hand that gave wealth away to warriors, widows, the poor, and freed slaves. This is the moral center of the narrative in Islamic memory. He was not important because money made him important. He was important because faith and character shaped how he used money. That difference explains why his name still appears in lessons about business ethics, migration, and charity. His life tells Muslims that trade does not have to compete with piety. His life also tells migrants and rebuilders that dignity can survive even when old support systems disappear. The answer he gave to Sayyid ibn al-Rabi remains one of the most famous lines in early Islamic storytelling. Show me the marketplace is remembered because it carries so much inside so few words. It carries gratitude toward the Ansar, refusal to become dependent, confidence in lawful work, and readiness to rebuild. That line also reflects the social world of Medina, where markets mattered to communal life and survival. Abdur Rahman ibn Auf entered that world not as a passive guest, but as an active participant in its economy. Trade in clarified butter and cheese may sound humble, yet that detail is part of the beauty of the story. The story begins with ordinary goods, not with royal treasure or a miraculous pile of coins. That is why the rise feels grounded in the human world of buying, selling, trust, and daily effort. The reports do not say he entered Medina, opened one deal, and became wealthy overnight by magic. They show a merchant who used intelligence, discipline, and reliability until capital began to grow. That growth then supported marriage, household life, military service, and major giving to the community. Even his political importance later fits the same pattern of trust built over time. A man trusted in trade can become trusted in counsel, and Abdur Rahman ibn Auf reflects that logic. His presence in the Shura, chosen by Umar, is one of the strongest signs of that deep trust. Umar did not fill that council with ordinary names. He selected a very small group of leading companions. Abdur Rahman ibn Auf stood inside that group because his judgment, reputation, and standing were already established. Then, when the time came, he did not simply chase personal rule for himself. His role in the selection of Uthman shows restraint alongside influence, another reason his memory remained honorable. That restraint matches the same inner seriousness found in reports of him weeping over worldly comfort. The same man who could build great wealth could also step back from political ambition. This combination is rare, and that is one reason his biography remains so compelling. He shows that success in one field does not require selfishness in every other field. He also shows that a person can be ambitious in trade and still humble before Allah. Some later stories emphasize his caravans, and some emphasize his donations, and some emphasize his tears. Taken together, those themes create a full portrait that Muslims found deeply admirable. The caravan stories show scale. The donation stories show generosity. The weeping stories show conscience. Without all three, the portrait becomes too flat and loses what makes him distinctive. That same fullness helps explain why he became a symbol of halal wealth, not simply large wealth. Halal wealth, in his memory, is not only money earned lawfully through trade. It is money earned lawfully, spent generously, and held with awareness that prosperity is also a test. His life also speaks to the link between migration and opportunity in early Islamic history. The Hijrah brought pain, loss, and separation, but for Abdur Rahman ibn Auf it also opened a new chapter. That new chapter did not erase the hardship of leaving Mecca, but it turned hardship into a field of effort. The Prophet's system of brotherhood gave him support, and the marketplace gave him room to act. The community in Medina therefore appears in his story as both compassionate and open to enterprise. Said ibn al-Rabi offered help from his own household, and Abdur Rahman asked for the road to commerce. These two men together represent two virtues of Medina at once: generosity from the helper and dignity from the migrant. That is another reason the story has remained so beloved across centuries of Islamic teaching. It teaches the one who gives and the one who rebuilds. It praises the Ansar for open-handed care and praises the Muhajir for self-respecting effort. The result is not a story of one side alone. It is a story of a whole community acting rightly. Abdur Rahman ibn Auf's later wealth does not cancel the beauty of Said's first offer. And Said's first offer does not cancel the beauty of Abdur Rahman's choice to seek the market. Together they create one of the most memorable scenes in all early Islamic biography. The reports about his marriage add another human touch that keeps the story close to daily life. The Prophet noticed yellow perfume, asked about it, and learned that Abdur Rahman had married. That moment shows that economic recovery in Medina was not abstract. It touched home, family, and social life. He was not merely piling up goods in storage. He was rebuilding a normal human life after migration. That makes the story feel warm, as well as impressive. His later generosity then shows that his prosperity did not remain trapped inside his own household. He equipped fighters, gave large sums, freed slaves, and supported widows and the poor. Those actions spread the benefit of his success outward into the wider Muslim community. This is why wealth in his story functions almost like a tool placed in the hand of a believer. The tool can build a household, help a cause, lift the poor, and support the struggling. The tradition remembers him using that tool again and again. When later Muslim thinkers speak about business and piety living together, his name naturally rises near the top. He was neither a hermit who rejected the market nor a merchant who forgot the hereafter. He stood in the market and still feared the test of the dunya. That tension gives his story moral depth, because it is easier to praise poverty than to navigate prosperity. Abdur Rahman ibn Auf had to navigate prosperity, and later memory says he did so with trembling awareness. His tears at meals, whether each report is equal in strength or not, express that awareness vividly. He looked at food, comfort, and worldly blessings and worried about what they meant before Allah. That worry did not stop him from trading, but it stopped the tradition from treating him as merely a rich man. He became instead a model of disciplined earning joined with serious self-accounting. That is why his name still matters in conversations about business, migration, leadership, and giving. He offers an early Islamic answer to a question many people still ask today. Can a person succeed in wealth without losing faith, humility, and service? His remembered life answers yes, but only if wealth remains tied to gratitude, responsibility, and fear of misuse. That answer is one reason the story continues to inspire Muslims across very different times and places. A migrant in 7th century Medina becomes a symbol for students, traders, families, and givers many centuries later. The distance in time is large, yet the emotional arc remains easy to understand. A man leaves home, starts again, asks for the marketplace, grows through trade, and gives back with a trembling heart. That arc is simple enough for a child to follow and deep enough for scholars to study carefully. It contains movement, struggle, work, honor, and spiritual caution all in one biography. This is why the best way to remember Abdur Rahman ibn Auf is not by one number alone. Not by the number of camels in a caravan, not by one figure from an estate, and not by one report of gold. The strongest memory is the whole pattern of his life from early Islam to Medina to leadership and charity. He entered Islam early, migrated more than once, rebuilt in the Medina market, and gave from what he earned. He fought in major struggles, stood close to the Prophet, and later advised the community at the highest level. He died wealthy, but he lives in memory because his wealth never stands alone from faith. That is the real transformation in Medina. He did not simply become rich there. He became an example there. If you want the next story from the companions, watch our next video on Uthman ibn Affan and how wealth, generosity, and leadership shaped early Islamic history.